Proficiency Masterclass, Student's Book by Kathy Gude, Michael Duckworth and Lewis Rogers. Published and copyright Oxford University Press 2012. Page 11, Exercise 2.
Speaker 1.
They're all right in their own way, I suppose. If they're on, I'll watch them, particularly if there's nothing else on I fancy watching. I know some people get totally hooked on them, but I can take them or leave them. I quite like the gritty realism in some soaps, but the majority are too far-fetched. And I think they can all be blamed to some extent for reinforcing negative stereotypes in our society. They can set up expectations of people that live and work in the settings depicted in the soaps that are way off the mark.
Speaker 2.
If you say you don't like soaps, people look at you as if there's something wrong with you. But, let's face it, soaps are so corny, so sentimental. The acting's usually atrocious, and the storylines are either hackneyed or downright unbelievable. How so many awful things can happen in one place is simply absurd. They're a right load of rubbish, if you ask me. I've certainly got better things to do with my time than watch soaps. If only people put as much time and passion into their real-life communities as they do into their involvement with these fictional characters.
Speaker 3.
Look, don't get me wrong, I'm the first to admit that they're a complete waste of time, but I watch them anyway if I'm around and they're on. Who knows why? I have a feeling that women enjoy them more than men, but quite a few of my male friends watch them too. Maybe it's an easy way to switch off and relax for a while and forget your own problems. Or just an excuse to have a good moan about how appalling they are with their unconvincing two-dimensional characters and contrived settings.
Page 18, Exercise 2.
You will hear 3 different extracts. For questions 1 to 6, choose the answer A, B or C which fits best according to what you hear. There are 2 questions for each extract. Extract 1.
So how did the trip go?
Oh, honestly, it was the most amazing experience. I wouldn't have missed it for the world.
I just can't believe you actually succeeded in getting enough sponsorship for the trip.
Well, we really did push the boat out trying to drum up support in our spare time.
Even so, it's amazing that you managed to fill 2 lorries with food and clothing, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, and blankets too. All sorts of things. But remember that we had to drive them ourselves. 1,500 miles. The Save the Children charity gave us a lot of practical help too, though.
And you must have been really proud of yourselves when you got there.
Well, pride didn't really come into it. Just seeing the faces of those children when we gave them some of the toys, the compassion you feel. You really want to load up the lorry with all the kids and bring them back here. But at least they were being cared for at that stage. So we left feeling that we'd done a really worthwhile job and that we could always retrace our steps, once we'd financed another venture, of course.
I might even come with you next time.
Ah, now there's a thought.
Extract 2.
Good evening and welcome. Tonight I'm appealing to everyone out there watching this. This live helpline round-the-clock special is in aid of the famine-stricken province we've been hearing so much about recently and seeing on our TV screens night after night. And believe me, however little you pledge, and we will make sure that it reaches its destination, will make a tremendous difference. Last year,
Page 18, Exercise 2.
You will hear 3 different extracts. For questions 1 to 6, choose the answer A, B or C which fits best according to what you hear. There are 2 questions for each extract. Extract 1.
And so how did the trip go?
Oh, honestly, it was the most amazing experience. I wouldn't have missed it for the world.
I just can't believe you actually succeeded in getting enough sponsorship for the trip.
Well, we really did push the boat out trying to drum up support in our spare time.
Even so, it's amazing that you managed to fill 2 lorries with food and clothing, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, and blankets too. All sorts of things. But remember that we had to drive them ourselves. 1,500 miles. The Save the Children charity gave us a lot of practical help too, though.
And you must have been really proud of yourselves when you got there.
Well, pride didn't really come into it. Just seeing the faces of those children when we gave them some of the toys, the compassion you feel. You really want to load up the lorry with all the kids and bring them back here. But at least they were being cared for at that stage. So we left feeling that we'd done a really worthwhile job and that we could always retrace our steps, once we'd financed another venture, of course.
I might even come with you next time.
Ah, now there's a thought.
Extract 2.
Good evening and welcome. Tonight I'm appealing to everyone out there watching this. This live helpline round-the-clock special is in aid of the famine-stricken province we've been hearing so much about recently and seeing on our TV screens night after night. And believe me, however little you pledge, and we will make sure that it reaches its destination, will make a tremendous difference. Last year, in between giving concerts to raise money, I myself went out to supervise the deliveries of aid to stricken areas. And I know from my own first-hand experience that whatever we do is a mere drop in the ocean. We can never, ever send enough to help these people. But what we do send will be greatly appreciated, so it all depends on you. Pick up the phone. The number to call will be appearing on your TV screen shortly and will be announced on radio programmes throughout the evening. You can ring and quote your credit card number, or if you can't get through, just send us a cheque or make an online donation and you can sleep easily in your bed knowing that you've done your bit for Helpline.
Extract 3.
So, I understand that you and your wife sponsor 6-year-old Anna from Africa. Why did you decide to take on a sponsorship like this?
Basically, we'd been wanting to do something to help people in the poorer regions of the world for some time. When we saw an advertisement in a magazine, we made up our minds to do something positive. Opportunity International seemed like a good scheme, not least because our donation is sent straight to Anna, her family, and the village where she lives.
So you know where your donation ends up and who's getting the benefits?
Absolutely. But what I found most extraordinary about Opportunity International was the way in which it works with the locals. You see, the people themselves decide how the money can best be spent in the community where the children live.
And how much do you know about Anna?
Quite a bit, actually. They've sent regular reports on the community's progress since we started paying, and we found out quite a lot about the charity's activities elsewhere, too. We donate monthly, and it's not such a lot to find, in all honesty. And it's not as if we can't manage without it or anything like that, but it's great to see that so much good can be done with the little that we give.
Page 21. Exercises 2 and 4.
We're assuming that global warming actually does exist, but there are people who dispute the claim that humanity's played a major role in bringing this about.
I agree that public opinion on this issue is somewhat divided. People argue that there is some evidence to suggest that this could simply be caused by natural changes in the Earth's climate, but to suggest that it doesn't exist seems a rather defeatist attitude to take. When what we should be doing is taking action now to prevent even worse things happening.
But if you accept the fact that the human contribution to global warming is relatively minor, then any policies we may put in place, for example, reducing carbon emissions by cutting down on travelling by air, and changing the way we power our factories so we consume fewer sources of energy, or trying to reduce the amount of greenhouse gases, etc., are misplaced, and we could be more profitably occupied with other matters.
But you seem to be suggesting that all the pollution caused by road traffic and the burning of fossil fuels and such like is having no effect on what's happening to the world's climate. I mean, this seems to be a rather counterproductive viewpoint, given the fact that most of the evidence indicates otherwise. Look, the reality is that the Earth is getting warmer, so we need to start taking action now to try and find out what's causing it. And if we don't make this action a priority, then the future of our planet hangs in the balance.
This all sounds rather overdramatic, and I'm not sure if there is as much concrete evidence of this happening because of human interference as you imagine. The Earth's climate's been subject to many changes, both recently and in the distant past, and temperature records show no significant trend towards global warming. In fact, the Earth actually cooled between 1940 and 1975, which rather contradicts what you're saying.
What?
Well, we've had extreme climate conditions where the very existence of the planet and life on it was threatened, and there's no guarantee that this won't happen again. But these things can't be attributed simply to human intervention.
Page 27, Exercise 3.
You will hear wolf expert Sean Ellis talking about his experience of living with wolves. For questions 1 to 9, complete the sentences with a word or short phrase.
Like most young children, I grew up with an innate fear of wolves. It wasn't until I was a bit older and saw a wolf in a zoo that I realised how far away this animal was from the mythological creature I'd learned about in books and films. I grew up in a small village in Norfolk and was always interested in the natural world and wild animals. I knew I wanted to work with them in some way when I was older. In my 20s, I read about an American naturalist, Levi Holt, who ran a wolf research centre in Idaho, and I thought, that's where I want to go. I sold everything I had and raised enough money from a plane fare. And when I met up with biologists working on the reservation, they took me on as a basic field biologist, teaching me how to track wolves and collect data for them. But I couldn't help wondering, could a human become part of their family? If I could, I thought, imagine what information I could share. I found myself wanting to get closer to the wolves, to really understand their behaviour, even though the other biologists and scientists thought it would be dangerous. After a year or two of working for the centre and getting to know the area, a rugged, mountainous landscape covered in forest, I moved to the wild. The first time I got up close to a wolf, within about 30 metres, any fear I had quickly turned to respect. I stayed in a den area, a remote spot where wolves look after their young. And very soon, one pack began to trust me. I lived with them day and night, and from the start, they accepted me into their group. I ate what they ate, mostly raw deer and elk, which they would often bring back for me, or fruit and berries. I never fell ill, and my body adapted quickly to its new diet. It's easy to look back and think, what horrible food, but when you haven't eaten for a week, it looks appetizing. I couldn't hunt, but I soon became useful looking after the younger ones. I would spend days sitting outside the den observing their behaviour and trying to make sure they kept out of danger. I stayed with the same pack for over a year, watching pups grow to adulthood. I never missed human contact during that time. I felt a tremendous sense of belonging with the wolves. Whenever I began to think about my old life, I would quickly switch my thoughts back. In terms of survival, I had constantly to focus on my new habitat. Although I didn't see anyone, there were people back at the reservation and I had a rendezvous point where I could leave messages if I felt I was in danger. I was only ever truly scared on 2 occasions. Once, When all the wolves were feeding, I ate the wrong piece of meat. There's a strict hierarchy of who eats what part of an animal. And one of the wolves leapt on me in seconds because of my mistake. He took my entire face in his mouth and started to squeeze hard. I could feel the bones in my jaw begin to bend. And in that split second I realised how vulnerable I was and how restrained they were most of the time. The other time, I wanted to get a drink from the stream, and one of the wolves stopped me dead in my tracks, growling, snarling and nipping me. I thought, this is the end, he's going to finish me off. An hour or so later, he started to lick my face and we both went to the stream for a drink. There I saw evidence of recent bear tracks and droppings, and I realised this was why he guarded me. I would almost certainly have been killed. But more importantly, my tracks would have led back to their young, so it was for their protection. Eventually, I had to leave. I had lost so much weight and looked gaunt and worn after a year. Life expectancy in that sort of environment was short, and I felt it was time to come back to society. Returning to the world was a tremendous culture shock, but I knew I could do a lot with the knowledge I'd acquired. I now run a centre in Devon that helps wild and captive wolves and offers educational courses. I want to show people that wolves aren't savage and ruthless. They're balanced and trustworthy creatures that place their family above all else.
Page 28. Exercises 2 and 3.
Now, in this part of the test, you're going to do something together. Here are some pictures showing people in different situations. First, I'd like you to look at pictures A and B and talk together about how common these situations are in your country. You have about a minute for this, so don't worry if I interrupt you.
Well, broadly speaking, this sort of pedestrian zone isn't really that common where I live. They're probably more typical in bigger cities. It's not exactly something you'd find in average-sized towns like mine.
Yes. I'd say that's very similar to the situation in my country. You don't often come across zones like this which don't allow traffic.
Yeah, but I think that cars and vans are pretty much always allowed into these areas to unload, particularly if there's lots of shops and restaurants. But on the whole, I suppose it's more pleasant than shopping on a busy road.
Maybe, but generally speaking, I think people in my country would prefer to go shopping in proper shopping mall where they won't get wet. Except, of course, somewhere like this is quite nice in the summer where you can sit outside in cafes and enjoy the sun and the fresh air. Actually, the trees make it look quite pleasant, don't you think?
Yeah. Yes, trees can make such a difference. It's great to see more trees being planted like in this picture. I think this is becoming quite a popular thing to do now in my country, especially in schools.
Yes. Tree planting events seem to be happening more and more in my country as well. I think people are becoming more aware of the environment and children usually enjoy taking part in activities like these. Actually, I quite like the idea myself, although most of trees are probably still planted in our gardens rather than in public spaces.
Page 31. Exercise 2.
Speaker 1.
Gosh, many moons ago, I'm not sure where or when, I think I read somewhere that culture is anything that you learn from other people. So that would seem to be quite a big definition. I come from Northern Ireland, and today, for example, there's a celebration known as the 12th of July, where people from my community are celebrating a victory in a battle which happened hundreds and hundreds of years ago. And I learnt that from, I suppose, people like my parents, brothers, sisters, friends at school, from the community that I grew up in general. And, without that community, without those other people, I wouldn't have been celebrating the 12th of July, certainly not as a child anyway. I don't celebrate it these days because I'm a pacifist.
Speaker 2.
I think culture is a very difficult concept to define, but I think I see it as anything that unites a group of people or a community of people. So I suppose anything that sets them apart from other people. So it might be within a type of organisation or within a country or within a continent. I think anything that is universal possibly can't be described as culture because that's just human experience. I suppose the question is whether you can have a global culture with modes of communication coming together, whether that is possible to have a culture that everybody shares, or whether culture has to be something that separates people.
Speaker 3.
I think it can mean many things. If you think about culture, often people associate it with the arts, with literature, with media, with television. Having lived in many different countries and experienced many different cultures, I think it's really the behaviour of particular people in different countries and how the general behaviour in that country has influenced the way that they live. For example, that could be habits such as family traditions. Maybe some cultures have a stronger family orientation. Maybe it's ingrained within their culture to sit down, have family meals, be very family oriented, whereas maybe in Western society it can be quite often that we don't have similar cultures and that people don't have such family values, people don't eat together.